let's talk about our 6 sampling method types. Now, something to keep in mind when we talk about all 6 of these. At the end of this lesson, you are going to start on your group project, which I'll talk to you at the end. In this group project that you'll do with 3 to 4 other students, each one of you is going to have to pick a different sampling method to complete. So as we're going through these sampling methods, begin to think about what kind of sampling method you might want to do for your project. So let's start right here at the top. First one, a simple random sample. In this kind of sample, every member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. This is probably one of the hardest types of sampling to do. For example, let's look at this first one. Drawing names from a hat. But if your population is really big, this gets really hard. Let's say my population is teen drivers in the state of Utah. Then I kind of have to go to the DMV, get a list of every single teen driver in Utah, put all their names into a hat, and then draw some. That's kind of a lot of work. However, if your population is smaller, say drivers at Mountain Ridge High School, it's a lot easier to get a list of everyone at Mountain Ridge High School and then draw a name from that. So if your population is really big, simple random sampling is really difficult. However, simple random sampling is one of the most reliable types of sampling we've got because it's very representative of your population. So, one more example before we move on. Assigning every member to a number and then using a random number generator online to randomly pick people. I actually do this when I pick who you're going to sit by in class. I give everyone a number, I pick a random number, I get a random number generator, just Google it, it's there, and then it generates a random number and that's who I pick. So that would be a simple random sample. Everyone in the population has a chance of being picked. Let's talk about the next one. A systematic sample. Systematic sample is where you select a starting point and then select every nth member to be a part of the sample. So this is, say, let's go through some examples to solidify this. You select a starting point in homes and then survey every 3rd home. Or another example, you stand outside the school as school ends and you talk to every 8th person who leaves the school. That's systematic. There's a system in place. You pick a starting point and then there's a system for picking who comes next. Or maybe you're in the lunchroom and you look at all the lunch tables and you pick every 13th person at a lunch table. That's systematic sampling. But one thing to keep in mind for this one, your population kind of needs to be naturally organized. You can't really go to a big bunch of people and then just start counting them. There kind of has to be a line. So maybe you work at a drive-thru and you want to ask every 3rd car that goes through the drive-thru. That's systematic random sampling. Okay, next one. Stratified. Stratified and cluster sampling are the 2 that are most commonly confused because both of them have to do with groups. Now, here's the difference. In a stratified random sampling, you have groups and then you pick a couple people from each group. Whereas in cluster, you have groups, but you pick everyone from a couple groups. Now, the analogy I've always used in the past is like Halloween candy. There are 2 kinds of people who organize Halloween candy. So, first person, you organize all your Halloween candy into types of candy you have, and then you eat one from each group to make them last. Or you have the person who organizes all their Halloween candy and then eats all the Reese's because those are their favorite, and then eats all the sweet tarts because those are their favorite, their second favorite, and then eats all of this one because those are their favorite. So that first one where you have your Halloween candy and then you eat a couple of each types, that's stratified. In this one, you have your Halloween candy and you eat all the Reese's and then you eat all the sweet tarts. That is cluster sampling. Both of these are fairly representative types of sampling when done correctly. But they do tend to take a little bit more work, and your population has to be divided into natural groups. For example, lunch tables in a cafeteria. If the lunch tables in the cafeteria are organized out, I could either ask one person from each lunch table or ask everyone from 4 lunch tables. That's a good example of stratified and cluster. Here's a couple more examples. If you want to study all the high school students that are involved in extracurricular activities, divide them into their extracurricular activity, and then randomly pick a couple from each group. That's your stratified. Versus your cluster, you want to know about your entire school, so you select all the first periods. So then in that case, your groups would be each class period, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. And you're going to do everyone in the first periods. So hopefully that makes sense, the difference between stratified and cluster. Let's do our last two. Convenience and volunteer. These are by far the easiest types of sampling to do. However, they tend to produce the least reliable data. And here's why. In convenience sampling, you are asking everyone from a population that is readily available. So, for example, you want to know something about people who eat fast food, so you ask everyone at the fast food store you work at. That is very convenient for you because it's where you're at. Or maybe I want to know average ACT score, so I ask all of my students. Very convenient for me because the students are already there. That is convenience sampling. You ask people who are around you in your life, people who are easy for you to ask. So, for example, right here, we have a local store, or you want to ask shoppers what they think about a local store. So you ask them as they exit the store. That's a really easy way for you to ask them just as they're coming out. Very convenient. Versus our last one, volunteer sampling, are also called self-select sampling. I guarantee you have been part of a volunteer sample. If you have ever gotten an email that was like, hey, if you liked our product, will you rate us? Will you give us a review? That is volunteer sampling or self-select sampling. It's where you choose if you are going to answer the survey. So members of the population self-select to be included in the sample. So, for example, it's lunchtime, you put your survey questions out on a lunch table and you say, anyone who wants to, please answer it. That is volunteer sampling. Those people are choosing to pick up your survey and be part of it. Another example, you buy a pair of shoes, the cashier calls you and asks you to fill out an online survey about your experience. That is a volunteer sample. But like it says right here, these two are very prone to bias. They're not very reliable types of sampling. So that is our 6 types of sampling. The last thing I would like to do is to do example 2 together. So I want you to pause the video, read through example 2, and decide what type of sampling method is being used in that example. And then come back and check your answers. Welcome back. Let's check what you got with what I got. In A, they are asking students to take the survey. They just post it and ask them to participate, so that is volunteer. In B, they're asking every 5th person who walks into the cafeteria, so that is systematic. And C might be the trickiest. The groups are all 5th periods, and you're going to ask 20 of those 5th periods. So that's cluster. If you wanted to ask 3 people from each period, that would be stratified. So there is your examples of types of sampling. For your assignment today, if you turn to the next page, you need to do 1 through 6. And for your skill check for your group project, this is what you've got. You should be in groups. You need to start by identifying your population. Each group member needs to pick a type of sampling. And you all need to decide on the same question that you are going to ask. So your population and your question need to be the same for your entire group. The only difference is that everyone is going to use a different type of sampling. Once you fill this out, you will submit a picture of it through Canvas, and then I will pass it off. One thing about your question is your question must be quantitative, which just means that your answers should be numbers. So whatever question you ask, you should be able to get numerical answers. Like, what is your shoe size? How many hours of homework do you do a week? What is your ACT score? Those all get numerical answers. So once you get that all filled out, submit it on Canvas, and I will pass it off.